Welcome to Tales at Scale, a podcast that cracks open the world of analytics projects. I'm your host, Rena from Imply, and I'm here to bring you stories from developers doing cool things with Apache Druid, real-time data and analytics, but way beyond your basic BI. We're talking about analytics applications that are taking data and insights to a whole new level. Finix is a payment processor with a platform that is built to help companies quickly optimize revenue and manage their business operations. They're on a mission to create the most accessible financial services ecosystem in history. And payments are just the tip of the iceberg. They're working towards a global operating system for fintech. And one of the technologies helping them with this mission is Apache Druid via Imply Polaris. Joining me to talk me through the whole project is Ross Morrow, software engineer at Finix. Ross, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Rena. It's a pleasure to be here.
I always like to, get a little background on my guests, how you got to where you are today. So tell me your story of how you ended up at Finix working in fintech.
How far back?
As far back as you want to go.
I'm okay. I'm a little untraditional, but that's not super uncommon in tech. So tech is my second career, I guess. I was an academic. I stayed in school for way too long. And then I was a professor for about 5 years. I mostly did research and teaching associated with computers and computer things, even though I wasn't in the computer science department. About a decade ago, I left that career path. I had a bit of a realization that I was a little bit more of a geek than aligned with the academic career path. And I got into tech. I've had the good fortune to have a variety of different roles in the tech sector in different domains. And for about 5 years now, I've been in fintech, insurtech areas, focusing primarily on software engineering related to the platform, DevOps, infrastructure development, developer experience, and how all that kind of overlaps with data. So that's kind of how I arrived here.
Very cool. I love non-traditional career paths. It's as I have gone through that myself. Didn't think going to school for music would end up with me being a developer advocate. So here we are. Okay, so your company Finix. Can you tell me a little bit about what your company does for those who aren't familiar?
So we're a payments facilitator and payments processor, basically. We offer a highly configurable and very flexible, but as I'll probably discuss a little bit more, all-in-one business-to-business B2B payments platform. So we help money move, and we help money move, in a variety of ways, and that's not as simple as just actually moving the money, because there's a lot of regulatory compliance involved. There's a lot of reporting and accounting involved, and all sorts of other bells and whistles that are very important. So a couple ways we do that. We are, I don't know the right non-reductive way to say this, right? But there are some very large legacy financial service providers that are a little bit, they don't have to offer new technology because there's something like an oligopoly, right? Like there are just few of them. They're the ones that can move the money. They've built the infrastructure, and they're largely built up their capabilities with mergers and acquisitions. So their offerings tend to be somewhat fragmented. And so we have products and we have customers that use us to offer a reasonable experience on top of those legacy providers. More recently, we have become actually a payments processor. So we are actually connected to the payments rails, and we are migrating into the space that those the several handful of legacy financial service providers for payments occupy. So directly connected to all the card networks, directly moving the money, and so on, within the same kind of customer experience for our customers.
So within your area of fintech, what kind of sets you apart from other payment service and processing companies?
Well, again, we're a highly configurable and lower cost platform for our customers that want to help, usually their customers accept payments, accept payouts, or and generally move money. So we are lower cost than some other providers, but we offer a lot of capabilities for our customers to also decide how they're participating and what fees, dues, and assessments are actually happening when money moves. And that's a big advantage we see as something we can offer to our customers. We have a really, really fantastic award-winning modern dashboard for our customers to like see all their transactions, all their disputes, all their refunds, with insights and graphs, as well as like all the detail. And that's all based on APIs, right? Like has gotten pretty common. So anything somebody can see in our dashboard, they can pretty much access through APIs, and that's a really powerful enabler for what customers can do, because when there's such a really nice award-winning dashboard, right, they have to know less technical detail sometimes, right? We're providing a lot of services that are getting towards like the low and no code spectrum, which opens up more opportunities for people that want to accept payments or send money, right, to integrate with us. We have really good customer service. So I don't get the opportunity to work with customers directly very much, uh, but I see all the kudos we get. So we have really, really good customer service, and that's not the case for all the payments providers,
Yeah, I can
or,
only
or
imagine.
payments facilitators. Um, there are, uh, I think about maybe every month I see a LinkedIn post about some other payment provider I won't name, right? And like what happened. So importantly, also, and I think I hinted at this before, we're really trying to offer like an all-in-one multifunctional platform that does not require somebody to integrate with a customer to integrate with a different part of our product suite to do something else, right? So in our one platform, we can handle multi-channel money movement, right, in store and online. We are international, at least the US and Canada. Like we accept payments in the United States and Canada today. And we're multi-directional. We can, do payouts as well as accept pay-ins and do like push to card transactions and other things. So, but the important part of that is like the product is built to not to require you to adopt a different part of our company's product suite to do that. It's all in the same place.
All right, speaking of platforms, let's shift gears and talk about databases, my favorite topic. So, for this project, what kind of prompted your search for a new database?
Well, we're really at a phase where we're focusing on our ability to scale. So depending on what your bar is, right, for like data volume, velocity, and so on, we're still like we're not like thousand eyes, right, and like we're not Google scale, but it's still big enough data that we have to think about how we work with it, right? And we're also looking to the future with our current growth trends at we need to make sure we are scaling correctly for our customers, and one of the places we need to focus on that is in our data systems that supply not just our platform capabilities, but like our customers understanding of what's happening in our systems and how the money is moving and all of that. So in general, this adopting Druid has been part of our work to try to um, understand better how we're not limited as we scale with our data. In particular, specifically to something like Druid, we deal with a lot of data that is probably more suited to OLAP than OLTP. And our primary platform is built on transactional systems, and we use some transactional systems. And one of the potential roads for us to achieve some more scalability is identifying technologies that better suit the specific need for analytics. Along with the scaling concerns, we're looking for technologies that may be natively distributed, because that may be an important part of like not relying so much on traditional relational database management systems that work well up to a point, right? Or work well up to the experience of the people that are and the investment the company is making in managing those systems. And we're also very interested in event driven computing. We for all intents and purposes have pretty much have an event driven computing system already. And we're looking at opportunities, especially with Kafka, to both do internal stuff like messaging, like through our systems, and as an ETL tool, and maybe a change data capture tool. And so we're looking, we're interested in technologies that are natively compatible with Kafka, especially for data. We are not that big of a company. We don't have we have enough but not that many engineers, and we have a lot of responsibilities, and we have to focus on things that are differentiate us, in our market. Uh, and that does not mean we get a lot of time to focus on database administration, right? So we need something, and we need technologies that help us reduce our potential costs for like managing managed services, so to speak, right? And like working with things like relational database management systems or data lakes, or other related technologies. And I think what's critical for me is that there's a really important distinction between immutable and mutable data, and there's a lot of data we deal with, and uh, either do or can potentially do analytics on that just simply does not change. So there are a lot of activities that our customers do in interacting with our platform that we treat in an event based way, and that data never changes, right? There's a record of that occurring, and then it's gone. And then you know moving money is complicated and actually involves quite a bit of back and forth, right? Like data back and forth representing the current state of a particular transaction on a particular card network for two particular parties. uh, but still there are a lot of pieces of that are immutable, that we have to render as, this event happened, this money moved in this direction, right? um, I think that kind of recognition that there's some data that just never changes isn't going to be an important thing for us to have in mind as we're looking for more scalable database alternatives, broadening our technology suite.
So I heard you mention Apache Druid a couple times. Had you worked with Druid before, or did it come up as you were evaluating database options?
I personally have worked with Druid before. So I have used Druid for a similar purpose. So basically, telemetry is the high level kind of data domain. So used it for storing basically GPS plus signals that came from real world sensors, right? In something like real time, certainly real time, for the company I was working for.
So we kind of feel like you kind of covered this when we talk about like the key features that you were needing. But I'm assuming with fintech, things like security, data accuracy, high reliability, those are all probably on your list. But are there any we haven't covered that key features that you needed for this?
I mean, those are really important.
Let me just summarize it for you real quick.
Yeah, those are really important for us.
You know what I forgot to ask you though? What were you using before Druid, before this project?
In terms of database technology,
Yeah.
well, I mean, we kind of already use everything under the sun. So we use relational database management technology. I mean, that's a critical component of, I feel like, most systems, right? Like something transactional is kind of required. Uh, but we have highly schematized data, right? Like highly structured data and highly unstructured data. But for our highly structured data that we really need, very hot access to, relational databases make a ton of sense, right? Um, we also use NoSQL databases. We also use key value stores. We use, key value store caching. Like we definitely use all of those things. In a couple of the use cases we've explored with Druid, um, we've used transactional schemaless data stores, and whatever works is probably appropriate, but we probably use these like a little inappropriately, right? As like we never made updates, right? And like there are a few other features we can talk about. We can talk about later. Um, so we use a variety of technologies, and I think the issue for us in a couple of the use cases that we moved over to Apache Druid is mostly maintenance, uh, good data design, right, and um, costs. So our implementations of, say, an existing NoSQL like data store were actually like on the kind of pricey side for us.
Did you look at any other Druid-esque databases, any other OLAP databases when you were trying to evaluate?
I think in general we're aware of like the landscape for streaming compatible OLAP style like databases. Um, we have some experience and kind of like know what some of the alternatives are. Um, but for us, like we're trying to move really fast. We develop really fast. We release features really fast, right? Um, and I've seen this a few times while I've been at Finix. Sometimes the prior experience really like makes or breaks like the ability to actually engage with the project. Um, and sometimes I think Druid's a fantastic technology. I like using it. I think it offers a lot of opportunity and options for like managing real-time data, especially at scale, right, and serving insights to customers, or internal or external. But sometimes the initial project is not what the company lands on, and uses 5 years from now, but it can still open the doors and create the acknowledgement of an opportunity to use the technology. um, so I think in this case, we didn't do any expansive multi-technology comparison proof of concept work, because we don't want to devote we could have those resources, but we don't want to devote them, right? Specifically, we want to focus more on what's differentiating us for our customers as a good payments platform.
So let's dive into your specific use case. What are you using Druid for?
So I mentioned we effectively have an event-driven computing platform under the hood. So we are using Druid internally as a way to store all of the event data that's passing around our systems, to describe money movements, to state certain directives about how money should move, to describe auditing events, right, for various activities, um, as well as identify how we're interacting with our customers. So the whole platform is based on a lot of these events that are moving through our system. So out of band, outside the critical path, thanks to Kafka and Druid, we are able to persist that data, and we are able to analyze that data. We are able to look into what it is saying about how money is moving in our systems in a dramatically easier way than with previous technologies. I can explain why. Of course, we're also using it for during our initial adoption, some relatively low risk but higher volume immutable data like logs that we have to store for our internal analysis and for visibility to our customers. So this feeds customer facing features. as well.
You mentioned Kafka a couple times. Can you kind of walk me through where Druid sits in your data architecture?
Sure. So it sits, thanks to Kafka, outside the critical path, right? So we can kind of asynchronously write out to Kafka, and then we can read that data into Druid via just native Kafka ingestion jobs in Druid. So it's a great, it was a great opportunity for us to be able to change and advance our storage of some of these like events and logs and so forth, without any possibility of that really interfering with money movement activity, or customer interactions. And that's really really important to us from an engineering standpoint and like a product standpoint. So outside of that critical path, right? We still have all the data. Uh, it's still very very fast, and we can facilitate both ad hoc and API access to the data. So in particular, we haven't mentioned Imply very much, right? But like we're using
Oh,
Imply.
we'll get there. We will
We'll
get
get
there.
there,
Don't you
right?
worry.
So we can always go to the SQL workbench, right? And we can do whatever analysis like we want to do, and this has been super helpful for us. And we also serve data back via API, and for that we use just normal JDBC connections and queries with Avatica. So we kind of send the data out of it. We see say events or an incoming API call up, or we send out a webhook and like we're sending events into Kafka. That's kind of getting into Druid, and then depending on when someone calls our APIs to access that data, we return data via a call to Druid.
So for this particular project, you chose the path of doing Druid with Imply, via Imply Polaris, which is our database as a service built for Druid. Why go with something like a managed service like Imply Polaris versus, say, open source Druid?
Well, I think I mentioned this before. We want to focus on what's valuable to our customers, right? We want to focus on differentiating ourselves as a payments processor. And as cool as Druid and other database technology is, and as geeky as we are, wanting to like learn more about those technologies and operate them well, that's not necessarily what differentiates us. Um, so managed services exist on a spectrum. Some are like really really managed, some are not so managed services, right? And we not only need to know that we don't have to spend a lot of time and other resources to stand something up, but also not to get surprised by future maintenance expenses that distract us from being able to like operate the best payments platform, right? So those are really important for us, right? Like that's an important consideration for us. And so working with Imply specifically for Druid, we get the opportunity to work with like the experts in Druid. We get to work with the people that know it best and are the most invested in it, and have offered in Polaris a very accessible low code integration point to interact with Druid. So that's really important. And I think also having the tooling, the additional tooling that Imply has built around Druid purely as a database is really critical and useful for us. There's one of our in some of the use cases we've moved into Druid, one of the shortcomings has been the access to the data. So our API systems have, no issues accessing the data because we've written the software to access them. But not every NoSQL database is the same, and they all have their peculiarities and they all have their patterns of querying. So having something that's natively supports SQL and has a nice dashboard for us to, do exploratory data analysis on the data we're sending through Druid without having to stand up and maintain and manage stuff ourselves to facilitate e- democratize data access to whatever, we're sending through the system, even just internally, is really, really powerful opportunity for us.
I mean, full transparency, how's that going? How are things? Because Polaris, is still relatively new in terms of technology. Druid's been around for about a decade now, but how are things?
I think things are great.
Okay. The dramatic pause.
The dramatic pause. I think things are great. I always feel a little bit conflicted about like kind of the build versus buy. As previously when I used Druid, I also worked with Imply, but we did the other thing, the non-Polaris thing. I don't think Polaris existed at that point. We ran it ourselves. We ran Druid ourselves, and I'm a highly technical person, and I like the details, and I like to understand. So like the build versus buy is kind of always an internal tension for me. So I'm very curious about what makes optimized segments. Like, how are we doing this, right? Like, how's this going to impact our query performance if we do X, Y, or Z? So, from that perspective, like coming from that perspective, when I originally heard about Polaris, I kind of thought like, well, won't we lose something? Like, how well will it work? Do I lose a lot of capability to understand the system and to make sure the system's working to my benefit or my company's benefit, right? What am I giving up for this? And I was really I really leaned on in exploring Polaris as an option. Our need for minimal intervention and maintenance, right? Like we can start to take advantage of a new data technology for our company, right? If it is not heavy on the overhead. And the experience has honestly surprised me from that perspective. So I don't feel like we're losing much, if anything. I think the system, generally works well. So we can do click ops to like make tables and like create our schemas and run ingestion jobs at the same time as the API is super clear, right? To put ingestion specs and table specs and other things in our version control systems, and have simple scripting, right, or CI that helps us understand that like things are working well. So it's been a great experience, honestly.
Were there any like challenges that you've run into? Like, how did you solve them? Actually, you know what? I'll even broaden that, like not just Polaris, but like Druid in general.
Well, I mean, there's some specific things and there's some general things. So, I mean, in like one specific thing is that's about Druid as kind of like a database design. Both are kind of about Druid as a database design. Druid's got these inverted indexes, right? And indexes everything, so you have to think really carefully about the data model. You don't have to think about your indexes like you have to do with other NoSQL database technologies. But you do have to think about what you're doing. So we ran into some challenges. Kind of having a mentality that everything would really be free when we're indexing everything, and like we had some features like kind of embedded into our data models, and ran into some minor limitations there. But it was really an interaction with data modeling, and understanding what the database is actually interpret how the database is actually interpreting the data. I think in general, though, it's a little bit of a mentality shift for engineers, that are really, really, really used to relational database management systems in particular. So like one of the first questions that comes up is like, can we join? How do I join?
Oh, that joins. Oh, I've talked so much about joins.
I know. I imagine, right? But that perspective, like some of those perspectives are like so ingrained, right? Like, or how do I update a record? And so like, well, we're dealing with classes of records that we don't actually want to update. And maybe that's like a priority for us. And when you're asking, do I want to update this? Right. You're signaling something is maybe a little, funky with the data model. Um, and none of those are critical challenges, right? But they're mentality shifts, and depending on who you're working with, they can be people can think those are interesting, or people can sometimes think those are deal breakers, right? They don't fit into their mental model. I would I'll admit I would love like a code generating SDK to understand, because understand and generate code for our tables, to be able to use like kind of the encode SQL like but more software like interfaces. Like, we are very, very used to that, and a lot of companies I think are really used to that and use ORMs or some variant of an ORM. And I think, the developers, myself and other developers that have worked with our experience with Druid through Polaris, are comfortable writing SQL, right? And it's definitely like it's definitely the right interface point. But also it feels like we're really missing something that, lets us speak in like speak queries, but in chained software operations with defined objects.
Mhm, mhm. So you mentioned, part of it is having a mentality shift, but do you have any other advice for people who may be like just getting started? Like, what should they keep in mind if they like have identified a project to use Druid for?
I think one of the things that should come first, and this is probably, it's probably going to sound weird, but is analytics, right? Is like doing things with the data. Um, we have been interested in and needing to get to like the really real time data availability, right? Um, but at least in terms of Druid, it's also kind of like the joins and the updates. Easy to think about another database technology as like a record retrieval system, right? Or subset of records retrieval system, where you know that misses the A in the OLAP, right? And like there are really good opportunities to provide internal insights, external insights, customer facing features, right? If you lean in from the beginning on doing the analytics portions, right? So both of the applications I've been a part of that have leveraged Druid have kind of sat in the middle, and I think it is leaving some of the analytics value on the table, um, because they try to both do data retrieval, right, as well as analytics activities with the database. I think in general, though, I really like the experience that Druid offers. I really like the experience that Imply offers. And one of the things that's been really compelling for me about this particular engagement is how easy it has been to get started. Right? How available Druid's a complicated system, and Imply has made it very accessible. More accessible this year than 3 years ago. And I think that's highly relevant to me as kind of somebody that sometimes has to sit in an architecture role, and somebody that's thinking about the future scalability that our customers at Finix will depend on. Because I've been around a lot of places that think like Druid's for Netflix, right? Like Druid's for scale. And I also hear a lot of stories about people pushing their Postgres until it breaks, right? And so I'm really excited by the opportunity to engage with it, right? Kind of at a low price point, not just in terms of money, right? But like, the resources we have to expend to just start exploring, if it's a really strong long-term fit for our systems.
I tell people that all the time too, where they think that they need to be doing like petabytes of data to use a system like this, and that they have to have these really, robust infrastructure in place and like all of this, like to your point, like Netflix. But that's the whole point of something like Polaris, is to be able to get started and then have the ability to scale as your company grows, as your data volume grows, versus like having to start with all of that in the first place.
Yeah, yeah. And I think some of those challenges I mentioned about, can I join? Can I update? All of these things, they're all also opportunities to reflect on the sort of data a company's actually working with and how the company wants to work with that data. Um, so even when those are confrontational questions, uh, I think those confrontations can like result in some organizational value in recognizing like what are we doing and how are we dealing with it, and like at what cost in terms of human resources and money and time and all of that. Question people should ask about real time. So like something, our real time data in Imply Polaris via Druid is sub-second, like 100%. Like sub-second queries, sub-second data availability, right? It's a different order of magnitude than anything that's not our hot, right, relational database management systems. And so broadly, there are some important business questions about like when and where do you need that? But it's definitely very somewhat straightforward to get it right if you use this technology stack we've talked about. And there are uh, certain situations where opening the opportunity and acknowledging that you could have something like that like might change people's perspectives on what the product can be and like what the systems can look like, that are important to address.
Well, Ross, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been amazing. If you want to learn more about what Finix is up to, please visit finix.com. If you want to learn more about Apache Druid, please visit druid.apache.org. And if you want to learn more about Imply and what we're doing with Imply Polaris, please visit imply.io. Until next time, keep it real.